Just a moment. All right, you may begin whenever you want.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jesus. Okay, everyone, welcome to the May 24th, 2021 meeting of the CB6 Land Use and Waterfront Committee. My name is Adam Harkey, and I am the chair of the Land Use and Waterfront Committee. This meeting is being called to order at 6:32 p.m. Tonight, we are joined by District Manager Jesus Perez. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there is time following the community discussion, we will field questions from the public. Okay, Wells Magali so generously offered to take minutes for this evening. That's back to back. Thank you very much, Wells. We appreciate your endeavor, and we look forward to seeing minutes next month. You all should have received emails about the doodle poll. If you haven't signed up yet, please do. Highly encourage it. Thank you. Jesus can direct you to the link in the chat. Okay. At the direction of the board chair, each committee meeting must have a designated minutes taker and a designated backup. To eliminate the guesswork, make sure you volunteer for as many slots on the doodle sheet as you can. Okay. All right. With that, we are now going to take attendance. Jesus, will you please conduct a roll call?
Yes, give me 1 second. Those of you who are presenting that are asking whether screen sharing can be enabled, yes, it can. Just give me a minute. We will enable it before you make your presentation. All right, committee members, I will call your name. You will unmute yourself and you will state that you are present. Jim Collins. Jim Collins. Adam Hartkey.
Present.
Thank you. Molly Hollister.
Here.
Thank you. Kavitha Matthew. Kavitha Matthew.
Here.
Thank you. Sandy McKee.
Here.
Thank you. Wells Magali.
Here.
Thank you. Jean Santoro. Jean Santoro. Larry Shire.
Here.
Thank you. And Seligman.
Oh,
And
won't be here this evening.
okay. Lou Sapersky.
Yo.
Thank you. Sandro Sherrod.
I am present.
Thank you. Letty Simon.
Present.
Thank you. Kathy Thompson.
Present.
Thank you. And we have quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jesus, and great to see everyone this evening. Okay. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and appears on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Okay, seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes for the April 26th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as. Uh-oh. Okay. The minutes from the April 26th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Okay, seeing none, the minutes are adopted. These will soon be made available on the CB6 website. Okay, so this is very important. We're going to set the ground rules for this evening. We have 2 public hearings back to back. So it's very important that all members, be they part of the committee and beyond, adhere to these for an orderly, productive meeting. So no one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click on the participants icon, the participants panel should appear. You should see the raise hand function. If you're still having difficulties, flag Jesus and he'll help you out. Please do not use the chat function. This is not for committee business. If you have any questions, again, please use the Q&A feature or raise your hand. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I or Sandy, who is the co-chair, will identify you and you will unmute yourself so that you may speak. We are required by executive order to create a verbatim transcript of the meeting. So please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Okay. So again, this is, we're having 2 back-to-back ULURPs. If for those who are all present, this is going to be quite the marathon, sort of 6 weeks for this board. This will be, we have 6 on our plates between now and June 28th. And so we thank you all for your time, and we're looking forward to a very productive meeting. So with that, I will excuse myself for the first 2 and because of a potential conflict of interest. And so with that, I will turn over the meeting to the co-chair of the Land Use and Waterfront Committee, Sandy McKee. Sandy, please.
Okay. The public hearing for the ULURP application by BP 343 Madison Associates, LLC, and the MTA for 2 Vanderbilt corridor special permits, ZR 81-633 and 81-634, to develop 347 Madison Avenue with a maximum 30 FAR commercial building is now open. If any members of the public want to make remarks on this matter, please type your remarks into the Q&A feature, and we will take questions after the end of the presentation. Gentlemen.
Hello, this is Zach Bernstein with Fried Frank, Land Use Counsel to Boston Properties. I'm here at Boston Properties, 599 Lexington and Community Board 6 with Rich Monopoly next to me and Jay Stewart as well. My colleague Liz Lee is attempting to start sharing her screen. Let's see how that goes. Liz, are you there? Are you on audio?
While we're waiting on Liz, Lou, you have your hand up. Is there an issue?
I am curious as to what specifically the involvement of Community Board 6 is in this project. And that's because the west boundary of Board 6 is Lexington Avenue.
Lou, that will be addressed in the presentation.
There were going to be specific items that impact on
Yes, Lou, there are transit improvements proposed for our district.
That's right, yes. And we'll get to that and show it. So just in short, before I go into the main presentation, just to hit on that question, there are transit improvements in Board 6. The building is in Board 5, but the entire ULURP gets referred to Board 6. So we'll be going through a presentation that includes the building as well as the transit improvements that cross over into Board 6. So this is a joint.
Much obliged. Thank you.
Of course, no worries. This is a joint application by Boston Properties and the MTA to facilitate the redevelopment of the MTA's former headquarters property at 343 Madison Avenue. The proposed project is a new office building with a prominent on-site entrance to the Long Island Railroad's new East Side Station. The project will also include 3 off-site transit improvements, as I mentioned, at the 42nd Street Grand Central Subway Station. The MTA, as the property owner, selected Boston Properties to develop the site under a 99-year ground lease. Here today from the MTA is Bob Paley, the Director of Transit-Oriented Development, and Lisa Schreibman, the Senior Director of Strategic Planning at New York City Transit. In addition to Rich Monopoly from Boston Properties here with me, we're joined by Doug Hocking and Andrew Query of KPF Architects. To start, I will ask Mr. Paley to give some background on the MTA's goals for the projects.
Great. Thank you, Zach. Good evening. I'm Bob Paley, Director of Transit-Oriented Development at the MTA. And as you all know, this has been a long time in the planning, and we're very pleased to be here today. In 2015, MTA moved out of its Madison Avenue headquarters building and consolidated downtown at 2 Broadway, Following an RFP and competitive bidding process, the MTA board approved the selection of Boston Properties to redevelop the property under a 99-year ground lease. Under the transaction, Boston Properties will be paying to the MTA yearly rental payments under the ground lease, as well as full property taxes. As contemplated by the RFP, these payments will provide critical ongoing funds in support of MTA's capital budget. This project will also provide a prominent entrance to the Long Island Railroad's new station on the east side, which we refer to as East Side Access. Additionally, the project will include 3 priority improvements within the 42nd Street subway station on the Flushing line, which we identified as critical needs during the East Midtown planning process. You'll hear the details of these transit improvements later in the presentation. I'm now pleased to introduce Rich Monopoly of Boston Properties.
Thank you, Bob. Hello, I'm Richard Monopoly, Senior Vice President with Boston Properties, focused on development for the New York region. We are a publicly traded REIT with 52 million square feet of properties across the country in all the major markets, including Boston, New York, DC, San Francisco, and LA. We own 7 office buildings in Midtown Manhattan, and as shown here, 5 are located in Community District 5, and 2 are just over the boundary into Community District 6. 2 of our most important holdings, I would note, 599 Lex, our headquarters since Morton Zuckerman built the building in 1985-86, and 601 Lex, the former Citigroup Center, which we approached you all about 3 or 4 years ago about minor modifications to that permit and major enhancements to our public space there. Next slide. We have a track record of building and maintaining transit entrances within our Midtown properties. Shown here is 7 Times Square, which we built in 2004. And most of you are probably familiar with this subway entrance at 42nd Street, which we rehabilitated as part of this development, and we are responsible for maintaining. Next slide. This slide shows our buildings at 599 and 601 Lex. In the foreground, you can see the 51st Street Station entrance to the 6th and the E&M trains that straddles these 2 properties. Next slide. We recently completed major upgrades to the subway entrance at 601 Lex as part of our overall public space improvements at this property, which were originally approved by Community Board 6 and the Department of City Planning in 2016. Next slide. We're very excited to have the opportunity to work with the MTA on our next office building at 343 Madison Avenue. On the right side of this slide, you can see a rendering of the new building, which you'll hear more about from KPF. And on the left side, you can see the distinctive new entrance for the Long Island Railroad that the project will deliver. We believe this building will be an addition to East Midtown that we'll all be proud of. I'll now turn the presentation back over to Zach Bernstein, Boston Properties Land Use Council, who will outline the land use application.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Rich. On the left here is a map of the East Midtown subdistrict of the Special Midtown District. Highlighted in orange is the 343 Madison site, which is located in a sub area called the Vanderbilt Corridor. This is a 5-block corridor with zoning rules that were established prior to the East Midtown District and apply a little differently. In the East Midtown District, bonuses for transit improvements are as of right and don't require a ULURP application such as we're here with today. However, in the Vanderbilt Corridor, transit bonuses are by special permit only through what's called the Public Realm Improvement Bonus. Under this bonus, we're seeking an increase from 15 FAR to 30 FAR for the provision of on-site and off-site improvements to transit infrastructure. For reference, this is the same process that One Vanderbilt went through for similar bonuses. The application before you will facilitate a building totaling approximately 750,000 square feet, about half the size of One Vanderbilt. The bonus would be generated through the creation of the new 45th Street entrance leading to East Side Access, together with circulation improvements to the 42nd Street subway station that we'll detail a few slides down the road. Next slide, please. The special permit also includes certain zoning waivers for street wall, retail continuity, height and setback, building entrance width, loading, and curb cut regulations. These waivers are similar to those granted for One Vanderbilt and will result in a better site plan and more functional office building. Doug Hocking of KPF will now walk through the building's design, after which Andrew Cleary of KPF and Lisa from New York City Transit will provide the details of the proposed transit improvements. Doug, next slide.
Thanks, Zach. I'm Doug Hocking, a principal at KPF. KPF was pleased to be selected as the architect for this project. I'd like to briefly walk you around the site for context. Here's the Madison Avenue frontage. The existing facility is actually comprised of 3 separate buildings, and the buildings' respective floor plates do not line up. Next slide, please. Along 44th Street, you can see the existing building on the left with the MTA's ventilation building for the Long Island Railroad concourse right in the middle there. And on the right is the Yale Club. Next slide, please. Here is the frontage, the 45th Street frontage. To the right is the development site. In the middle is a 3-story portion of the existing 347 Madison building, and to the left is 52 Vanderbilt. On the 52 Vanderbilt frontage, you can also see the existing entrance to the Roosevelt Passage into Grand Central Terminal, and this entry will remain in place. Next slide. The site footprint is relatively small for an office development. At 25,000 square feet, is a little more than half the size of 1 Vanderbilt just down the road. Within this footprint, the site planning is dictated in part by the vent building staying in place on the south side, as well as the new entrance to the Long Island Railroad, which must be at 45th Street, corner of the site. We have pushed the building back from Madison Avenue as required to create a 20-foot wide sidewalk. We are also widening the sidewalk on 45th Street to the standard 15-foot width. The building lobby will be along Madison Avenue, and required loading docks will be along 44th Street. The remaining area dedicated to our core with the elevators to be on the eastern edge of the site is what is called the side-loaded core building. The next slide, please. Here is the resulting ground floor. Again, the transit entrance along 45th Street, the lobby along Madison, and the remaining space along Madison and East 45th Street dedicated to retail. Next slide. The architecture of the building starts with looking at its function. Here's an illustration of our initial massing study showing a simple podium and tower, the elevator layered in. Next slide. When we began to think about how to articulate this massing while keeping a functional office building, paying attention to buildings in close proximity and within the Midtown area, perhaps the most important move is the recess along the entirety of the northwest corner of the building, highlighting the new transit entrance as a distinctive element of the streetscape. Next slide, please. Moving up the building, we look for opportunities to break up the building through the creation of recesses, notches, and terracing. The design of the proposed building will also ensure that light and air will reach the surrounding streets and public spaces through the use of these terraces and recesses. Next slide, please. From a sustainability perspective, we have aimed to exceed the requirements of the 2020 New York City Energy Conservation Code, including by using energy efficient glazing, low flow fixtures, automatic lighting, and state-of-the-art heating and cooling. We also designed with accessibility in mind, following the best practices in universal design. In terms of wellness, our design components include maximizing fresh air circulation, access to outdoor space, attention to space for social distancing in the lobby and other common spaces, touchless interfaces, and maximizing fresh air circulation. Next slide, please. The team is very proud of the place this building will hold on the skyline. It fits in well within Midtown while also remaining unique. The building would be a distinctive addition to the Manhattan skyline. Next slide, please. And here you can see the building rendered looking from the southeast on Vanderbilt there in the background. Next slide, please. And here we can see the building rendering from the west. Next slide, please. Moving down to street level, here's the 44th Street frontage at the site. As I noted, we paid a particular attention to the building's adjacency with the Yale Club. Conditions at street level remain the same with the vent building staying in place. The new building will cantilever over the vent building, but will stop short of the Yale Club. We've included a reveal in our building to show the decorative mason coating of the Yale Club at the southwest corner, preserving views of it from Madison Avenue. Within the building, there will be retail activation at the corner of Madison Avenue and 44th Street. Next slide, please. And finally, we are most proud of how the building design highlights the prominent new transit entrance at 45th Street in Madison. By recessing this corner of the building, we create a clear identifier of the supported new entry point to the Long Island Railroad and the Grand Central Complex. Next slide, please. Bob now will tell you a bit more about the importance of this entrance.
Great, thank you, Doug. So MTA is gearing up for the opening of East Side Access, which will bring Long Island Railroad commuters directly to the East Side for the first time. And this is a detail showing how the project site opens up an opportunity for an entrance to East Side access. The concourse, shown in cream color, is approximately 50 feet below Vanderbilt Avenue. And the blue rectangles to the east are the Long Island Railroad platforms, which are approximately 160 feet below Park Avenue. And to the north and south of the project site, we'll have entrances to East Side access. But as you can see, the southernmost portion of the track locations, showing the blue track locations, are approximately equivalent to 45th Street. And so the entrance really is at a critical location to allow our customers to exit from this new service out to Madison Avenue. And this entrance is really only possible because the project location is going to be redeveloped. Daniel Cohn from Stantec will walk you through the details of this on-site improvement.
This is Andrew Cleary. I'm taking Daniel's place
Okay,
tonight.
sorry.
Thanks, Bob. All the same. I'll do my best. So zooming closer in on the East Side access concourse level, we see the site in dark yellow. As Bob noted, the site is directly adjacent to the escalators that connect down to the south end of the LIRR platform, so very strategically placed. Next slide.
Could you improve the audio, please, Mr. Cleary?
I'm not sure how I can. Mute is off. I'll try to talk a little louder. Can you hear me?
Much better, thank you.
Okay. If we look at a cross section of East Side access, we can see the LIRR platforms highlighted in blue here at the bottom right, deep below Park Avenue and the Metro North platforms. The site, again highlighted in dark yellow, provides a direct connection to the street from these platforms. A passenger exiting the train would take an escalator ride up to the concourse level, and then, next slide, move up through the site to get directly out onto 45th and Madison. A significant amount of engineering work has already gone into the design of this entrance, which will require approximately 50 feet of bedrock excavation to reach and to tie into the concourse structure. Next slide. This slide shows the street level of the project site where we're providing this brand new entrance to Long Island Railroad East Side access at the corner of 45th Street and Madison Avenue. These circulation elements together would have the capacity to serve approximately 10,000 passengers every hour. Next slide. This is an axonometric cross section that shows the transit elements coming down from Madison Avenue to reach the concourse level below. Next slide. Here is a similar diagram, a view from the south, however, showing the elevator run and the double height entry space, which is a significant and generous connection from the above grade pedestrian circulation network to the below grade pedestrian circulation network that's being built out as we speak. Next slide. And this is a series of photographs that shows some of the work that's already been done in preparation for the connection to the East Side access. On the upper left-hand corner, you can see the face of the bedrock within the development site. This is what will have to be excavated out to tie the site into the concourse. The other two photos show the structural modifications, again, that have already been made to the concourse, made possible by Boston Properties' close coordination with the MTA. Next slide. And this photograph is exciting for many of us as it shows the new LIRR East Side access concourse. The blue sheetrock on the left-hand corner of the photo is where the project's new entrance will be. And this, this is an actual photograph. It's already been built and it's under the site as we speak. Next slide. And finally, here's a rendering of the corner of Madison Avenue and 45th Street that shows the new East Side access entrance at the street level. The East Side access entrance's finishes are consistent with the rest of the East Side access concourse's finishes and will be distinct from the building's lobby at grade. Next. Now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Lisa Schreibman from the New York City Transit to discuss the project's off-site improvements to the Flushing line.
Thank you, Andrew. My job at New York City Transit is to help optimize the customer experience. The improvements that will be completed as part of this project were selected because the Flushing line is one of the system's busiest and Grand Central is the second busiest station complex. In connection with East Midtown planning process, we identified circulation improvements to the 42nd Street station of the Flushing line, and these improvements were included in the priority improvement list for East Midtown. On the screen now is a portion of the station that runs from 3rd Avenue on the right to Park Avenue on the left. This platform is 3 levels down from the street and a level below the 456 Lexington Avenue line. There are circulation issues related to riders going from the Lexington Avenue line to the Flushing line and from the street to the Flushing line. On the left side of the screen, you can see the illustrative pedestrian flows at the U stairs, the new center core stair, and a widened stair on the east side that we believe will help address the circulation problems at this station. Next slide. On the top of the slide, you can see the existing pinch point for riders going up or down stairs from the Lexington Avenue line. We are proposing to widen the stair, which will add an additional passenger lane. This will improve the dwell times of the 456 and increase subway on-time performance. Next slide. Here is an image of the existing condition. Next slide. And here's an image of the proposed widened stair condition. Next slide. Customers transferring from the Lexington Avenue line to the 7 move along a corridor to one of 2 stairs that land towards the center of the 7 line platform. We are proposing adding an additional stair further east and lengthening the corridor. The addition of these significant improvements will reduce crowding on the 7 line platform, reduce congestion, and reduce travel time for customers. Next slide. Here is an image of where the corridor currently ends. Next slide. And here's a rendering showing the new passageway. The existing wall will be excavated through to create the passageway, and stairs will be added at the end. Next slide. Moving all the way east on the platform is a stair which connects directly up to the street. Currently, the stair leading to that circular area that you can see in green is narrower than both the platform and narrower than the stairs that lead to 42nd Street. It'll be widened from 4 to 6 customer lanes, which will provide for improved passenger flow and a better customer experience. Next slide. Here is an image of the existing condition. Next slide. And here's a rendering showing the 6 travel lanes divided into 3 segments. Next slide. In total, you can see on this slide the 3 major off-site improvements for the Flushing line Grand Central circulation network. We are very pleased to see these improvements coming to a reality, which we believe will provide an improved rider experience and address long-standing circulation issues at the station. I will now turn the presentation back over to Zach.
I'd also like to note that the project has the support of the Riders Alliance, the New York Building Congress, NYU Rudin Center, Association for Better New York, the Building and Construction Trades Council, and 32BJ. MTA and Boston Properties look forward to completing its work on this project together and discussing further with you. we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to take questions from committee members first, and then we'll open it up if there are any questions from the public that are attending the meeting. See if I can.
It looks like Larry Shire requests the floor.
Larry, go ahead.
Thank you very much. This was a very fine presentation. I would like to ask about one feature in the building and about one feature in CB6. In the building, you had referenced an existing Roosevelt Hotel passageway. There's a branch of that which goes to Madison Avenue. I understand that this project isn't going to affect the part in the adjacent building to the east on and the exit to 45th Street. What will happen at Madison Avenue?
Yeah, in order to accommodate combining the three existing buildings or creating one new building and a core, the core is at the center of the building at the rear wall. And so that connection from Madison, which currently had gone through the lobby of the MTA's old headquarters building, will not exist anymore.
And there will be no substitute access through the lobby for the Long Island Railroad.
Well, for the Long Island Railroad, there is a new dedicated entrance at the corner of 45th Street. The lobby of the new building does not itself connect. It's the dedicated transit entrance at the north.
So you'll keep the two railroads segregated?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
The second question relates to what's of greatest interest to us in Community Board 6. That is the completion of the Second Avenue subway, which, as originally proposed in its current iteration, will have a passageway that will connect to the number 7 platform coming over from 2nd Avenue and 42nd Street via an underground corridor. There were in the zoning resolution some provisions for, I think, access to the street at 3rd Avenue and neighboring buildings. Perhaps you could review that with us, and while you're doing that, explain how this proposed new staircase will play with the ultimate 2nd Avenue subway connection, or will there have to be a future modification?
Lisa or Bob, are you?
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. So the future new staircase, and maybe if we can go to one of the earlier slides. No, this is a 7 line. If we could go to an early slide that sort of shows the passageways and how the Long Island Railroad concourse works, that's a great one. Thank you. So there'll be a new entrance approximately where that blue call out is, and it links into this passageway, and that passageway links into Grand Central Station. So the Long Island Railroad will connect into Grand Central. So like if your goal is never to walk outside, you will be able to do that directly using this passageway. And of course, from Grand Central, you can then access the subway network by paying and coming into the subway. As you mentioned, there is going to also, in the future, when we get to phase 3 of the 2nd Avenue subway, be an entrance to the 2nd Avenue subway that will connect from the east, coming into an area, you know, I mean, engineering still in the future to be done on this, but considerably farther east, that'll connect into the subway network. So if you're talking about what the relationship is between this new entrance proposed for 45th 45th Street and Madison is to a 2nd Avenue and 42nd Street entrance, it's a long way away. I mean, certainly people will be welcome to walk it. People will have paid a fare to do it. So my guess is that people will use the street network instead if their real goal is to get to East Side access. But some people may think that it's worthwhile paying that fare to stay dry at certain times of the year.
Actually, I'm more focused on riders from the 2nd Avenue subway transferring to the number 7 train and how that will be accomplished. Because the stairway at the east end of the 7 platform here is at a different level than the escalators coming down from the street. And that creates potential conflict with where a new corridor going over to 2nd Avenue to the 2nd Avenue subway will have to be located. Or do you have another plan for that?
So the stairs that we're talking about widening at the east end already exist.
Yes.
And I don't know the engineering plan for 2nd Avenue subway's connection in, but I can take a look at what that is and get back to you.
Okay, because if you can make provision somehow for what will happen when that is constructed, we may not have to build twice.
Absolutely.
Great. And Jean? Jean?
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. I had to find the unmute button. I wanted to confirm something and ask a question. My understanding from your presentation at CB5 is that there's absolutely no public space inside this building whatsoever.
Well,
aside from the atrium.
Yeah, this public space in 343 Madison is the new transit entrance down to East Side access. That was what the MTA put out in its RFP that was seeking from developers, and that's the public space within the building.
Okay. But a bigger thing that I was curious about, because I did watch the CB5 meeting, was the funding mechanism for this. So just so I'm clear, MTA owns the building and doesn't pay any taxes because it's a state agency. MTA is leasing the building to Boston Property for 99 years. So therefore, Boston Property wouldn't be paying any taxes either. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. Boston Properties is paying to the MTA in addition to rents. They're paying the equivalent of full property taxes. So,
right, but that's the pilot program.
It is being paid to the MTA under an agreement with the city of New York, but the amount of the taxes, the tax component of the payments, is the amount of taxes that is assessed by the New York City Department of Finance. So it's the same amount of payment into public coffers, that would be made if it weren't owned by the MTA.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking, just for my own satisfaction, is if the pilot agreement wasn't in place, would Boston Properties be paying taxes straight out to the city of New York?
So,
yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, let me just answer that. Because MTA owns the property, as you correctly pointed out, it is not subject to taxes, but Boston Properties would be paying the equivalent of full property taxes to the MTA. And in this case, as Zach mentioned, we have an agreement with the city of New York how to invest the funds that come from the pilot payments.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Kavitha, you had a question?
Yes. I have a question regarding the full project, actually, but specifically the building, even though I know that it's not within our district, but I just want to understand better how the offsite improvements and the east side access, while really, they are helpful, useful amenities, equate to essentially doubling the FAR. I think we're going from 15 to 30, if I'm right about that. Could you just go into that a little more?
Sure. The Vanderbilt corridor zoning was set up in order to facilitate redevelopment of office buildings in this corridor, allowing for the text as written in 2015 or 16 allows for bonuses of up to 15 FAR. And on a small site, 15 FAR is a smaller amount of floor area. On a large site, it's a larger amount. So at One Vanderbilt, for example, the site is a much larger site. And so an additional 15 FAR gets you a lot more floor area. Here, the 15 FAR is 376,000 square feet. After the Vanderbilt corridor was established, you all went through the East Midtown rezoning process, which rezoned the larger area that you see on the left side of the screen. And actually that process standardized in a way the amount of floor area bonuses that are granted for different types of improvements. And so for this project, all of the flushing line improvements are already listed in the zoning resolution with certain pre-established by the MTA and the City Planning Commission, pre-established amounts of floor area that they generate. And the on-site improvements, although they're not on the list, the amount of credit they're being granted is based on the amount of credit for similar types of improvements that was established under the East Midtown rezoning.
So just to follow up, the 15 FAR is regardless of the floor plate of the building, and you're saying given the smaller site, it ends up doubling the space. And I mean, it just feels to me like this building is really maximizing its bulk, its height, and everything, even with the setbacks. It does feel like it's really, even with the setback from the Yale Club, it doesn't feel significant. It feels like it's really being built out and maximized. And my own concern is just, precedents for things that can happen later on. But I don't know if there's any further explanation you can provide on that, or if there's any really.
Well, I guess one other thing I will say is, it's a relatively small site for an office building. And in order to have functional office floor plates, you need to utilize a certain amount of the site to, have your core with your elevators and then circulation space around that. And so, the design reflects sort of an iterative process to try to have a functional building, and it steps back where the number of elevators drop off, because not every elevator goes to the top of the building. And so where you have less space taken up by the core and the elevators, the building steps back while still preserving a functional floor plate. And that's essentially how the design was approached. It's a balancing of function and form.
And I'm afraid I can't see everyone who is on my screen. Were there other questions from our committee?
It does not appear that there are at this time.
I know we did have some questions regarding the daylighting and how much it varies from what is allowed in the Vanderbilt zoning. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. So just going back to East Midtown as a reference point, the East Midtown rezoning, which is as of right and doesn't require coming back for special permits, recognized that the zoning that had originally been established for Midtown for 15 FAR buildings wouldn't have fit the larger buildings that the recent East Midtown rezoning permits, and so relaxed the original rules that were established under the Midtown zoning district in the 1980s. But in the Vanderbilt corridor, those rules are not relaxed. Those rules are still the 1980s rules for 15 FAR buildings. You simply can't fit a bonus building within the way those rules were constructed. And so you see in this rendering One Vanderbilt to the south. Similarly, in order to fit a taller building, you start to break through some of the technical specifications that had been established in the 1980s zoning. So, similar to that, this building breaks through those 1980s rules for 15 FAR buildings, and so needs waivers from the daylight evaluation rules. But given the existing built context of buildings that have very high street walls around it, really, and the existing buildings that are on the site, the incremental loss in daylighting is very minimal, notwithstanding that the waivers are needed, because it's really the lower parts of the buildings around it and the building that block a lot of the the sunlight that comes in. And so the incremental loss of daylight is actually not very large here.
And could you just remind us of when the Vanderbilt zoning was put in place?
Vanderbilt was 2015, I believe. It was.
So it's actually relatively recent zoning that was established to maintain lower street walls and to provide more light on Madison.
Let me clarify, the Vanderbilt corridor zoning did not change any of the street wall rules of the 1980s. It gave applicants the opportunity to request bonuses and seek waivers. It was sort of East Midtown 1.0. It was an attempt to get office development going after the Bloomberg administration's East Midtown plan had failed. This was sort of a pilot program in these blocks, but it didn't change any of the height and setback rules at all. It was only the later East Midtown rezoning 2 or 3 years later that established an as of right framework for all of the rest of Midtown except for these 5 blocks. And so the underlying rules were not changed for these sites. That's why we're here in a Euler. Whereas the sites in East Midtown are able to develop without coming back because their rules did get changed.
And I guess we're just wondering why we can't adhere to the rules that were established relatively recently within this zone.
So what I'm saying is there were no rules established recently. There was an opportunity.
Well, let's put it this way, the zoning hasn't changed. In its most recent iteration, they did not change any of the previous rules. So, and that seemed to be the direction that the community was going at that particular time.
So what I'm saying is you cannot apply for a bonus. You can't add bonus floor area in this corridor without waivers on height and setback. And so you would, the point of the zoning was to facilitate transit improvements or public realm improvements. But when you do those improvements and seek a bonus, you also need to seek a waiver. You cannot build these bonus buildings without waivers in this 5-block corridor.
Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. I just wanted to pick up on the points you were making. It's my understanding from watching the CB5 meeting that, in fact, the chair mentioned that CB5 voted against the Vanderbilt corridor provisions in this aspect precisely because they were worried about the kind of building that you're presenting to us tonight.
I think part of the comment was that they voted against the relaxations that are as of right in East Midtown. May have been the finer point, but point taken.
Yeah, it was about the Vanderbilt corridor in particular. That's what Layla said, but thank you.
Do we have any other questions from committee members? I think one other issue that did come up in the CB5 discussion was that the development has to go ahead to actually pay for the improvements. And so that seems to be utilizing like both aspects of the zoning at one time. And it seems to be, how do we put it? Double dipping, I guess was the term that was used. You are going to be using the monies from this development to do the transit improvements, is that correct?
That's correct.
So the transit improvements will go ahead simultaneously with the development, or they have to wait until the development is up and running?
They are the source of funding for those improvements will come from this development project. So it will wait for the development project to happen.
We do have some questions that have come in from the public. This is from Sean Vakil, and he was wondering what is the time frame from start to completion of the project?
The build year, the year for first occupancy for the building is 2026 is when it's anticipated.
Another question from Helene Helene Winogard is any bike racks outside of the entrances, and how many elevators will there be in the building?
Andrew or Doug, do you want to take that question? I mean, there is bike parking in the building that they can speak to. They're not currently planned to be bike racks in the sidewalk.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's a certain amount of bike racks that are required to be in the building per New York City Building Code. Can't tell you off the top of my head exactly how many, but we'll be complying with that. In terms of elevators, we have 18 passenger elevators for the tenant floors. We have 2 freight elevators. We have 2 elevators in back of house. One that takes us up to the 2nd floor amenity, and one that takes us down to the mail room. And you see that elevator on the north side in blue. That in particular is an elevator that will allow people to come out, or tenants to come off the street and get down to bike storage below grade. And then probably the most important elevator for this conversation is the yellow elevator on the north side, which is the ADA elevator that connects the public east side access entrance all the way down to the concourse that's being built out now.
And I think to follow up on that, who will be responsible for maintaining elevators and escalators?
The developer Boston Properties will be responsible for all of the maintenance of this new entrance.
Okay. And another question from Sean Vakil. He's questioning the height of the building and wondering if there are any kinds of diagrams that you can show to let us know exactly what light and shadow studies have been done for the building.
I'm not sure I have those today, but the building is 1,050 feet high at its top.
So do we know, I think there were at the CB5 meeting, there were some questions about how far shadows would be thrown.
Yeah, there was yes. There is required to be a shadow study as part of the environmental review for the project, which looks at potential impacts on public open spaces or historic resources. And there were no significant adverse impacts. There are very, very small incremental shadows, mainly before opening time at which reach Ryan Park in the morning, but do not affect. What's looked at in the EIS is whether anything is of a width or a duration significant enough to affect the ability of plants or grass to grow, or the enjoyment of the public of sunshine in the parks. And there were no significant impacts found.
And what about at street level?
Well, the environmental review doesn't study shadows on sidewalks per se. It studies them on public open spaces and recreation spaces. But the incremental shadow or the negative increment on light filtration down to the sidewalk was less than 1%. Again, given the existing built context around here, you have the MetLife building, you have 1 Vanderbilt, 335 Madison directly to the south. You can see all the buildings to the west and the south where the arc of the sun is, and if you look down at sidewalk level, much of that is already blocked by the existing built context or the existing buildings that are on the site today.
And I guess there is another question of who approved these waivers. Actually, I think that's the process that you're going through, is looking for approval of the waivers. If they have not been approved to date. And also Ryan Pukos from the Grand Central Partnership would like to make a statement. And I think
Mr. Pukos, please unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes to make your statement.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ryan Pukos. I'm a senior project manager with the Grand Central Partnership. The Grand Central Partnership is a business improvement district serving an approximately 70 square block area in Midtown East surrounding Grand Central Terminal. As one of the world's largest bids, serving a district with 73 million square feet of commercial, residential, and retail building space, our goal is to keep our Midtown East neighborhood clean, safe, and thriving. We believe that the redevelopment of 343 Madison supports this goal in three important ways. First, the redevelopment will unlock privately generated revenue that can be used to make transit upgrades to enhance connectivity and safety in the district, including improvements of the 7-line platform and the Grand Central 42nd Street subway station, which falls within Community Board 6. The redevelopment will also enable a new state-of-the-art transit entrance on Madison Avenue with direct connection to the Grand Central Terminal and to the new East Side Access Long Island Railroad Terminal. Second, 343 Madison addresses a long-term challenge for our district by replacing aging commercial infrastructure with a modern, efficient, and sustainable Class A office building, which was one of the most critical goals of the 2017 Greater East Midtown rezoning. The new building will help attract and retain world-class talent and businesses that seek new construction and flexible office space. Finally, 343 Madison represents a critical investment in the economic health of Midtown East and the city at large. In the short term, this investment will support the city's economic recovery by creating thousands of well-paying jobs and bringing more workers to the district to support our restaurants, retailers, and other businesses. In the long term, it will boost tax revenue and help ensure that Midtown East remains a premier central business district and vibrant destination for New Yorkers and visitors alike. For these reasons, we support the redevelopment of 343 Madison Avenue. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And we also have Felicia Park Rogers from the Tri-State Transportation Campaign would like to make a statement.
Ms. Park Rogers, you may unmute yourself and you have 2 minutes to make your statement.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Felicia Park Rogers. I'm the Director of Regional Infrastructure Projects for Tri-State Transportation Campaign, and we are an organization that fights for safe, fast, and fair transportation options that reduce car dependence in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And I'm here today as a transit advocate to express our support for the 343 Madison Avenue project to redevelop this site. Among multiple benefits, this project will help to restart New York's economic recovery. And the project is located in a very key business and transit hub. Indeed, it is hard to find a more transit-rich development spot in the 5 boroughs. As one of the transit advocacy groups that spent the last year successfully advocating for more than $15 billion in emergency funds to save our precious transit system, we are especially pleased that this project will unlock critical revenue to support the MTA's much-starved capital plan and to fund badly needed public realm and transit improvements. That said, our support primarily stems from the LIRR rail station entrance, enhanced subway station circulation, and the accessibility improvements that the proposed development will bring. Our review of the project has led us to conclude that it is designed in such a way to both honor the historic place East, Midtown, and Grand Central hold in our city's transit and architectural history, as well as to meaningfully respond to the needs of the modern transit users, all while addressing sustainability concerns. Before the pandemic, overcrowding at the Midtown transit hubs was a major issue, including along the 7 line. This is expected to continue to be a problem when restrictions are fully lifted and workers begin to return to the Midtown businesses. This project will reduce pedestrian congestion above and below ground, as well as greatly improve wayfinding and circulation space. The sidewalks in this area are notoriously congested, and the proposed sidewalk widening will greatly enhance both mobility and safety for transit users and the area pedestrians. More broadly, Tri-State encourages dense development near transit hubs like this one. The Department of City Planning projects that New York City's population will grow to 9.1 million by 2030. Even if this number is not reached until 2040 due to COVID slowdowns, planning now for the future just makes sense. With our city's population projected to rise, we need to encourage people to live and to work near transit in order to reduce road congestion and related emissions. If we fail to transform our transit system to appropriately handle future demand, we will fail to bring back riders, and we will add to the congestion that is choking our streets. and according to the Partnership for New York City, costing our region $20 billion a year in lost revenue. In a time where we need to encourage people to use mass transit, not cars, we should be bold about developing densely but thoughtfully around transit hubs. This proposed project is a good example of both. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you. Larry, you had a question?
Yes. This new improvement is going to be for the benefit of the public and, of course, the MTA. What is the nature of the legal rights that both entities, the public and the MTA, will have in the space in this facility and in the equipment? In particular, I'm concerned that we not have going forward a fiasco like happened in the development of Zeckendorf Towers, where the maintenance, after it was in the hands of the developer, devolved into the escalators not being taken care of and the MTA not being able to exercise a right of self-help. What mechanisms and legal rights will there be in this case that will prevent that from happening?
Bob, would you like to take that?
So let me just respond. This actually has two mechanisms. One is there's going to be a standard maintenance obligation on the part of the developer for the new entrance. But more than that, in this case, we're actually the landlord. So our tenant will be under particular scrutiny to make sure that they're going to really be maintaining it. And we have full confidence in Boston Properties. They have a track record that is terrific in all the subway entrances that are currently in their building. So it's really, we don't see it as an issue. And by the way, without getting into more detail on the famous Zeckendorf issue was one of the first bonuses, and we've certainly learned a lot in the 30 years since that one was built. So that's somewhat of an old story, I think.
Great, thank you. Wells, you had a question?
Yeah, can you hear me, Sandy?
Yes.
I wanted to follow up with the team about the sustainability aspects of the building. As you mentioned, a few elements that were called out as sustainability measures. I was wondering if the building has an understanding of its potential carbon footprint or its potential energy use intensity and how that might compare to neighbors. And I'm wondering if renewable energy is a part of the plan for the building in any way, and just a little bit more detail on your sustainability plan.
Yeah, I can talk to that briefly. You have to understand we're kind of just at the early stages of design. However, one of the things that has happened in the city in the last couple of years is the adoption of Local Law 97 by the New York City Building Code. So that brings an already a very high bar of it's a law. It's required for building owners either to meet that standard or pay significant fines. So that's something we're working through in the early stages of the design to meet. On top of that, the ownership has expressed a desire to meet at the very least a LEED standard. That in the last year, we've switched from version 3 to version 4. I think we're also in one of the version 4 point something. So yesterday's platinum is now today's gold standard. So the bar for LEED is raising also. And with the owner, we've also talked about pursuing a WELL standard. None of it is finalized yet, but more and more tenants are actually, clamoring for buildings to adhere to WELL certification. So again, early days, but those are all on the horizon, and they'll be part of the design process as we move through it in the next year or so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Seeing no more questions, we would like to proceed with reviewing a resolution that's been drafted for the project. Jesus, could you put that up for us, please?
Sure.
And at the same time, could you also remind people of the options we have for responding to the project?
Sure. Members of the public may put a statement in the Q&A, or they may put a request in the Q&A to make a 2-minute statement.
And seeing no additional requests, actually, Sean Vakil has requested to make a 2-minute statement.
All right, 1 second, let me stop there.
And also, afterwards, Kevin Lipton would like to make a statement as well.
All right, Mr. Vakel, you have the floor for 2 minutes.
Hi all, how are you? My concern here is that we are speeding through this process, and the information for questions that I've already asked hasn't been provided. I'm very concerned with the light and shadow study, and as the developer has stated, that's only a 1% reduction. That 1% is actually it's magnified if you live in this area, because there are already other buildings that have eaten up the available light. For example, currently the only way I get natural light in my building is when the sun shines and hits the office tower across the street from me. So when somebody tells me it's only 1%, guess what? That 1% could actually end up being 50% for me. So I think that's important for us to recognize this and see these light and shadow studies. Additionally, I'd like to make sure that we are not granting any AHVs unilaterally. The DEP has not been able to properly enforce these noise violations, and we need to be more respectful of this neighborhood. We have Commodore happening, 270 Park happening. This building is being proposed. The traffic in this area and the noise is at all-time highs, and it's unacceptable. These laws and regulations are here to protect the public, and us steamrolling them for projects that never end for 20, 30 years is unacceptable to me. Thank you for this time.
Kevin Lipton, if you'd like to go ahead.
All right, Mr. Lichten, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Lichten, and I'm here to represent the Yale Club of New York City, where I am vice president. I am also a licensed architect in New York State and a member of the board of directors of the New York Landmarks Preservation Foundation. 50 Vanderbilt Avenue has been our home at the Yale Club for more than 100 years. I think that makes our building the longest standing member of the original terminal city that is both still functioning and operational, other than the terminal itself. But our community is not just a building on Vanderbilt Avenue, nor is it just the 9,000 members and their families who use the building regularly, nor is it just the tens of thousands of guests we welcome to our building and our neighborhood every year. Our community is also the approximately 300 unionized employees, mostly hotel and restaurant workers in our club, but also painters, electricians, engineers, etc., all citizens, voters of this city and their families whose livelihoods are dependent upon the healthy operation of our building at 50 Vanderbilt. Our community also includes the retail operation at our street level and the jobs sustained in that operation along 44th Street and Vanderbilt Avenue, as well as the broader community in Midtown East. That's why we're here tonight. We have been neighbors to Community Board 6 for a long time, through generations of change in our city and our neighborhood. And we have been witness to and participants in extraordinary developments in our neighborhood over that span of 100 years, including one now just up a block to our south at 1 Vanderbilt. We deeply acknowledge the need to update our urban infrastructure, the significance of the transit improvements contemplated, and the access to our neighborhood they facilitate. And we would even promote some of these endeavors. But we must do it in a way that promotes the return to health of our community and kindles the future vibrancy of our Midtown East home. As your long-term neighbors, we feel that we must use our voices in this forum to ask for more time, given a plan that is extraordinary in its scope and the speed with which it has been presented, and given that it is rushed without the time or understanding to contemplate the ramifications such a project might have on our broader community and the constituents we all hold dear. I am here simply to ask CB6 to allow some time before making big decisions. We are one of the largest stakeholders on the contemplated block, along with our good friends and neighbors at 52 Vanderbilt. We have had a great relationship with Bob Paley and the MTA over the years. We certainly understand what is at stake here, but we cannot be asked, and we are not ready to support or oppose this project yet, simply because we have not been afforded time to analyze the information, nor have we had extended dialogue with our potential neighbors as yet. We have to date not discussed in detail the plan at 343 Madison with Boston Properties, nor what remediation efforts will be undertaken to alleviate the extraordinary burden on our building or on any of us as neighbors. The shadow diagrams were noted at CB5, but we have an open air rooftop dining facility on the 22nd floor that sustains the jobs of more than 100 unionized employees. Yet no analysis of the shadow diagrams has been able to be completed given the timing of this information's transmission. A snow and ice analysis is mentioned, but we have not seen it. We will obviously face multiple burdens and challenges during the proposed demolition or during the construction period, notwithstanding the challenges and burdens we will face over the longer term.
Mr. Licton, your time has elapsed.
May I continue a little bit?
That's for the chair to decide.
Kevin, if you wouldn't mind wrapping up quickly, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
I'll mention our most important concern, and that's the placement of the proposed loading dock on 44th Street and its negative impact on the pedestrian route that was developed as part of the Vanderbilt corridor plan. We believe that 44th Street has suffered enough in recent years. Lane closures for the MTA shaft construction, now COVID, and now more lane closures for the demolition of the existing building. Our building contains the only retail space on this block of 44th Street. The addition of a loading dock will be the last straw, the death knell of street life on this block. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kate, this is Zach from the applicant team. May I just note one item in response? With respect to, we understand Yale's concerns about construction next to them and have met with them in the past. They're actually meeting again tomorrow. Just with respect to the loading dock point, loading is not permitted on 45th Street under zoning. And so the loading docks, which are required for this project to have off-street loading rather than on-street, which the buildings in the area typically have now, must go on 44th Street. That's the only place that loading can go. But we look forward to further conversations with the Yale Club and a fruitful dialogue and relationship for many years to come.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, we'd like to go ahead and review a resolution. And in terms of timing, I believe we have to respond to this proposal within a certain time frame. So I'm not sure we have the option to actually not form some sort of response this evening. It will, of course, go before the full board before decided on. So we have the option, we have several options for how to respond. We have no objections, we have favorable, conditional favorable, unfavorable, conditional unfavorable, and waive comment are all of the different positions that we can take. There was a draft resolution that was distributed today, and we still have the opportunity, we should discuss which direction we would like to go. And the draft resolution covered some of the issues that we've discussed here tonight. I think it focuses on light, on our concerns with the height of the building. Do we have any comments on the proposed resolution? Letty? I see your hand is raised, Letty. Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, if there are no questions, can we call the question? If there are no comments?
And I would just like to clarify which position we would like to take out of those that we have identified. We haven't specifically set whether we are conditionally favorable or conditionally unfavorable, or no objections. I think we do have objections, so that probably is not one of the options. Jean?
Yeah, excuse me. I'd suggest that of those options, we do conditional favorable. We're clearly not going to stop this project, no matter what we do. It's already in progress. But I think we should try to get some more juice back from what it is that they're doing with the curtain walls and everything else. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, do we have any comments on that proposal? All right, should we go ahead and vote for a conditional favorable based on this, the resolution that was distributed today? Okay, I think Jesus, we're ready to take a vote. Oh, sorry, Jean, your hand is still up? No, Wells, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, Danny, thanks. I was wondering if we might want to, I don't know, add to this resolution concerns about the pedestrian experience as a result from some of this, just highlighting some of the concerns beyond just the daylighting, which seems to be the main focus of this. It's just a question, you know, are there other concerns that were raised tonight that we would want to weave into this?
And I think absolutely, if there's anyone else would like to support that idea of adding some comments about the pedestrian experience. Kavitha?
I just wanted to support that. And also what Wells brought up earlier about a little more information about the sustainability aspects of the project, if we want to work anything in about that as well.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I think we can vote on the resolution. Jesus, if you wouldn't mind.
All right. If I have it correct, we will be voting on a motion to pass a conditionally favorable resolution for this project. Have I got that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so I will call each committee member's name, and they will vote either in favor of a conditionally favorable resolution, opposed to a conditionally favorable resolution, or abstain abstain on this matter. We normally have not entitled or abstain for cause, but in the land use resolutions that we have to submit, abstention is an abstention. So in favor, opposed, or abstention are your options. All right, I will call your name. Jim Collins. Jim Collins. Adam Hartke.
Abstain.
Molly Hollister.
Abstain.
Kavitha Matthew.
In favor.
Sandy McKee.
In favor.
Wells Magali.
Abstain.
Gene Santoro.
In favor.
Larry Shire.
In favor.
Ann Seligman, for the record, is not here. Lou Sapersky.
Abstain.
Sandro Sherrod. Sandro Sherrod. Letty Simon.
In favor.
Kathy Thompson.
In favor.
All right. With 6 in favors and 4 abstentions, this motion does not carry. So you all can choose to waive comment or choose another one of those choices to vote on.
And sorry, Jesus, was 6 in favor, 4 abstentions?
Yes, 1 second. Has Sandro left? If Sandro has left, then that'll put it over.
I just thought 6 in favor and 4 against would pass, no?
One second. That is my mistake. I'm very sorry. I was assuming that we had a full deck. Yes. 6 in favor, 4 abstaining does pass. My apologies for that.
Okay, thank you. The public hearing for ULURP application by BP 343 Madison Associates LLC and the MTA for 2 Vanderbilt corridor special permits, ZR 81633 and 81634, to redevelop 341, 347 Madison Avenue with a maximum 30 FAR commercial building is now closed.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next, the public hearing for citywide text amendment N210270 ZRY that will allow the MTA to work with private developers to make more subway stations ADA accessible is now open. If any members of the public want to make remarks on this matter, please type your remarks in the question and answer feature. And city planning is now up.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us tonight. It's nice to see you all. Um, so today we will be presenting zoning for accessibility, which is a joint application by DCP and ZFA, by MTA and DCP. And this is for a text amendment that aims to improve ADA accessibility throughout the city. Tonight, I'm also joined by Marcus Book and Howard Levine from the MTA, who will be making this presentation with me. We are going, so if you want to hear more information about any of the proposal that we present today, we can stay for questions, and additional information, including the detailed project summary and the entire annotated zoning text, is also available on the DCP ZAP search portal. We can follow up on any questions we can't answer today. And what we're asking for is your recommendations for the City Planning Commission about the proposal. Official recommendations from all 59 community boards, borough boards, and borough presidents are requested by June 14th, 2021. Now, I will let Marcus start us off with an overview of the background and the goals of the proposal before going over the zoning specifics.
Good evening, everybody. Hi again, Marcus Book from New York City Transit Government Community Relations. Let me just begin by saying in 2019, the New York City Council Land Use Division published a Let's Go report entitled Zoning for Transit Accessibility that proposed strengthening existing zoning tools to accelerate the implementation of ADA access throughout the city. Today, the MTA and the Department of City Planning are proposing a citywide zoning text amendment that builds on the ideas laid out in that City Council report. Elevate Transit, which is a zoning for accessibility, or ZFA, is a citywide zoning text amendment that proposes to expand two specific zoning tools to better coordinate private development and station improvements. First is a transit easement requirement that would apply system-wide. And second, a new transit improvement bonus program that would apply in highest density areas of the city. Next slide, please. The MTA New York City transit system is over 100 years old, and most stations were constructed before 1950. As a result, less than 30% of subway and Staten Island railway stations are currently accessible. The MTA system also includes the Long Island Railroad and Metro North Railroad. And while about 65% of these commuter rail stations are accessible, the greater interval between commuter rail stations magnifies the impact each inaccessible station has on our riders. So what are the impacts of limited elevator access in our system? Increasing accessibility is a key step in modernizing the city's transit system, as the lack of elevator access in stations affects many New Yorkers who have had a hard time navigating stairs. These riders include people with physical disabilities, our seniors, parents with young children, people with temporary injuries, and even just people who are transporting heavy objects. And in order to navigate the system, these customers rely on accessible stations, which may not be close to their origin or destination point. The result is that a subway ride that should take minutes can take hours. And for these transit riders, more elevators throughout the system would allow for shorter, more direct trips. And this segment of the population is not insignificant. Of the 8.4 million residents in New York City, over 500,000 have an ambulatory disability, and more than 14% of the population is over 65. Moreover, the number of seniors in New York is growing at more than twice the rate of the total population. As the city's population is growing older, there is increasing reliance and need for accessible stations. Making the system accessible for all of our customers is an urgent priority for the MTA. So to address these deficiencies in our current transit system, the MTA prioritizes accessibility improvements and other station improvements in their capital programs. The current 2024 capital program dedicates over $5 billion to making 77 subway, Metro North, and Long Island Railroad stations accessible. When the capital program is completed, 43% of subway stations will be accessible. Additionally, a key goal of the capital program is to ensure that no subway rider is more than 2 stations away from an accessible station. The current capital program targets stations in all 5 boroughs in order to ensure this goal is met. And in spite of the ongoing pandemic, the MTA is acting on these goals. In the last year, the MTA opened 11 new ADA stations and awarded more than a dozen new ADA projects. But as many of you know, the progress can be slow because elevator construction in subway stations is particularly challenging for many reasons. As I've mentioned before, stations are old and can have complex infrastructure, which make installing an elevator expensive or in some cases impossible. Within stations, platforms can be narrow, limiting the locations where an elevator can be placed. And at the sidewalk level, existing buildings near stations can prevent elevators from being built in optimal place. And sidewalks themselves can be too narrow to allow for clearance for an elevator. And additionally, subsurface conditions present decades worth of highly complex utility infrastructure, including sewers, water pipes, and electrical cables. So because of these unique challenges, often the preferable, or in some cases the only solution, is to place the elevator and corresponding circulation elements within private property. This is not unprecedented, as you guys have mentioned in a previous presentation, as there are already dozens of stations, station stairs, and elevators integrated within private properties throughout the city. So now I'm going to pass it back to Aska to continue the remainder of the proposal.
Thank you, Marcus. So as Marcus just mentioned, some of the challenges that MTA faces in terms of accessibility, that's where this proposal comes in. There are zoning tools in place today to help alleviate some of these burdens and support the construction of transit improvements. Specifically, there are the 2 transit-related zoning provisions that ZFA is seeking to expand. First is a transit easement requirement, and the second is a station improvement bonus, both of which this board is familiar with because of the future 2nd Avenue subway line as well as East Midtown. So by leveraging station access improvements in places where investment is already occurring, these provisions speed up the construction of station improvements for increased accessibility. However, these current provisions have certain limitations that ZFA is aiming to address. First, let's look at the current easement provisions. So these easement provisions address challenges of locating new station entrances and other transit amenities. An easement is a small permanent space reserved in a building for a transit agency to use in the future. Transit easements have traditionally been used to provide space for new station entrances, passageways, or ancillary facilities that support subway lines, such as emergency egress or ventilation structures. However, the existing easement provisions are limited to a few areas in the city, such as this along 2nd Avenue for the 2nd Avenue subway line. And as a result, there have been missed opportunities for MTA to locate ADA access at optimal locations on development sites next to a station. Second, the zoning resolution contains a transit bonus mechanism that supports the creation of transit improvements. In the densest commercial districts in the city, we've incentivized developers to both provide the space and to construct station improvements, including ADA access through floor area bonuses that provide additional development rights, as you saw in the previous application today. However, these provisions are also limited to certain sites immediately next to subway stations in or near central business districts in certain areas of the city. So to address these limitations, the Zoning for Accessibility, or ZFA, is seeking to create more opportunities for accessibility throughout the transit system through expanding these zoning tools available to us. ZFA proposes to first expand the easement requirement system-wide to most transit-adjacent sites and provide zoning flexibility on sites where easements are provided to offset potential burdens on development feasibility. And second, to increase participation in the transit bonus program by increasing its area of applicability to other high-density areas in the city. I will now go through the first component of this, the system-wide easement requirement. This would require all developments and enlargements on zoning lots within 50 feet of a mass transit station and in applicable zoning districts to file an application with the MTA and the chairperson of the City Planning Commission to determine whether an easement is needed on that zoning lot for future station improvements. However, while the certification would be required for all sites within 50 feet of a transit station, it is anticipated that MTA will only ask for an easement in limited places that are best suited for access or require their improvements. Looking specifically at Community District 6, this illustrative map shows where ZFA would be applicable. The red line shows the boundary of CD6. The light green dots show the stations where the proposed easement requirement would be in place, which in CD6 includes all the stations. And the dark green areas around these stations shows the zoning lots within 50 feet of an eligible station where an easement may be required for developments or enlargements. The transit agency, in consultation with the developer and the chairperson of the City Planning Commission, would determine the necessary easement for future station upgrades. Depending on the needs of the individual station, transit easements could vary in shape and size. For example, a vertical easement volume can take up several floors, as seen in this image, and a horizontal easement footprint can vary depending on whether it's for an elevator or a new station entrance. Because of this variation in easement shape and size, easement areas can affect development sites in a number of ways. The easement can take up a floor area by occupying several floors on a site. It could restrict ground floor uses and even create compatibility issues with surrounding uses. So without any zoning relief, a development could be limited from building to its full allowable potential. To make sure an easement creates minimal challenges for construction on a given site, the zoning will provide targeted relief to sites required to provide an easement. The categories of relief are floor area and open space, height and setback, parking, use allowances, and streetscape provisions. I'll now go over 4 of these provisions that apply to CD6. So the proposed floor area and open space relief includes excluding the easement from the floor area calculations. This allows the development to reach its maximum allowable FAR despite the easement. And to make sure easements are placed at an optimal location on site, they would be considered permitted obstructions, and where applicable, maximum lot coverage would be increased. In CD6, the proposed height modifications would allow for sites to increase their maximum height by 10 feet to allow for developable floor area space that would be taken up by an easement. there would also be greater street wall flexibility provided within 15 feet of an easement to create better flow around these spaces. Use allowances are proposed to help activate spaces around easements. This includes allowing vacant easements to be temporarily used as commercial spaces and allowing local retail uses within 30 feet of easements in residential districts. Modifications to streetscape requirements would be provided to exclude general streetscape rules like ground floor use regulations, transparency rules, and plantings, and to ensure the safety of transit users entering and leaving stations. Curb cuts would be restricted within 30 feet of an easement. Every site is unique and has potential additional challenges, however. So this proposal allows for further flexibility for uniquely constrained sites through an additional authorization, which is a discretionary action. For height specifically, sites could seek an additional height increase of up to 25%. However, if they request more height relief beyond that, they would need to seek a special permit. While the easement requirement only applies to developments and enlargements on sites with a lot area of at least 5,000 square feet and in applicable zoning districts, easement may be also provided voluntarily on smaller lots. For these sites that choose to provide an easement, the same zoning relief would apply. So this concludes the first part of the proposed ZFA. I will look over the proposed bonus mechanism. The second piece of the proposal is an expanded transit bonus program that would be optional for sites that are near a mass transit station. As mentioned earlier, today's subway bonus mechanism grants a floor area bonus of up to 20% for a significant station improvement, but only applies to station adjacent sites in limited areas of the city. With ZFA, the proposed transit bonus program would continue to grant its floor area bonus of up to 20% of the maximum floor area ratio for developments and enlargements that construct station improvements. And it would expand the geography of where a transit bonus can be used. The bonus would be subject to a discretionary review process in the form of an authorization by the City Planning Commission. The proposed bonus would expand the geography to other high density areas, including all R9 and R10 districts in the city, their commercial equivalent, and M16 districts. The new transit bonus would allow sites that are within 500 feet of a station to participate in the program in exchange for an offsite improvement that would be constructed at a station that is not immediately adjacent to the site. In central business districts, this would be expanded to 1,500 feet. This is an illustrative map showing the expansion of the bonus provision applicability in Community District 6. The blue dots show the current program's applicability, which includes the stations that are applicable under the East Midtown zoning. The pink dots show the 2 additional stations in CD6 where the transit bonus would now be applicable. The sites highlighted in orange are eligible sites within 500 feet of the station, and the ones highlighted in purple are the sites that are within 1,500 feet of a station in the central business district that would be able to participate in the optional bonus program. To receive a bonus, a development must construct a significant transit station improvement. The improvements can vary depending on the station needs and the bonus amount sought. However, if a station doesn't have ADA access, that would be the first improvement provided. The amount of bonus would be proportional to the improvements provided, up to 20%. The floor area generated from the bonus may only be occupied once the MTA determines that such improvements are usable by the public. If needed, developments could seek additional relief from zoning provisions. Depending on what the applicant seeks, the modifications may either be subject to an authorization which would allow a height increase of up to 25%, or a special permit if further height relief is needed. Other relief that would be made available through discretionary review approval includes modifications to use, parking, loading, and streetscape. Modifications pursuant to the authorization or special permit will be subject to specific findings to prove that the relief is necessary. So in conclusion, zoning for accessibility proposes 1, a system-wide easement certification requirement for all new developments or enlargements on a minimum of 5,000 square feet lot within 50 feet of an MTA station in applicable zoning districts to determine if they must provide an easement on site. There is also a voluntary options for smaller lots and conversions within applicable zoning districts. This is the only non-discretionary review proposed. ZFA also proposes an expansion of the transit bonus program, which allows a floor area bonus in exchange for significant transit improvements through an authorization. Both the easement and the bonus provisions also allow for further zoning modifications due to possible unique site conditions through additional discretionary review. An authorization would be required for modification, including a height increase of up to 25%, and a special permit is required for further modifications. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are currently in the public review process of this text amendment. We're asking for your recommendations for the City Planning Commission about the proposal. Official recommendations from all 59 community boards, borough boards, and borough presidents are requested by June 14th, 2021. Thank you for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Jean, please go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Okay, I have a question and sort of a comment. First question is something that someone in the chat has been raising, and I had in mind too. These various easements, who is going to be responsible for maintaining the spaces, maintaining security in the spaces? What kind of agreements are going to be built around those that are hopefully ironclad so that things like elevators staying broken for 1.5 years or 2 years, as happens now, won't be happening in these situations?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Yeah, and Howard from MTA can answer that.
Hi, Gene. It's good to see you, and good to see a number of other familiar faces. Still Howie, by the way, not Howard. But
I didn't know who Howard was. Okay, Howie, how are you?
It's good to see you, Gene. So in general, with the easement specifically, so the easement is just, of course, the space the developer sets aside. And so it's set aside, and then there might be some time before the MTA comes back and builds in an elevator or new station entrance, whatever it might be. And so before the MTA does that, starts that construction process, it's the responsibility of the building owner. And in fact, they can actually use that space for commercial or community use before the MTA requested that we're going to start our construction process on that space. Because depending on the exact situation, the exact improvement, it may be some time before we come back to build it. Once the MTA starts construction and then the improvement or the station access point is completed, then it becomes the responsibility of the MTA. It's really no different than a current MTA maintained entrance that you'd see in the system. Because the MTA in part because the MTA builds that entrance, it is considered an MTA entrance, even though it's technically on an easement. With other, and I think I've been seeing the same questions in the chat. So generally with that kind of applies as well to the bonus and those improvements that are built out by developers. So Aska has brought up a slide particularly talking about elevator maintenance. And so generally, as I mentioned, elevators and easements will be maintained by the MTA. Elevators built by a developer outside of their building footprint. So Aska mentioned that you don't have to be adjacent to the subway station. You can be up to 500 feet away or 1,500 feet away in a central business district. And so in a lot of cases, the developer may be building the improvement, but it's going to be on the sidewalk or within the MTA station entirely. And in that case, the developer will build it and then will enter into a maintenance buyout agreement with the MTA, with us, and the MTA will be responsible for the actual maintenance. And then in certain specific instances where the developer is adjacent to a station and the improvement, the elevator is built in their building footprint, they will be responsible for maintaining the elevator. And as Bob Haley mentioned a little earlier, we've learned a lot over the last number of decades with our easement agreements. And so any easement agreement, whether through ZFA or through or improvement and elevator maintenance agreement, whether through ZFA or whether through other provisions, has to be a number of mechanisms that are in a binding legal agreement that we have with the development. And so they must meet or exceed our reliability standards, which are currently 96.5%. They provide funding to replace the elevator at the end of its useful life. They must respond to any elevator outage within 2 hours. And to a point Larry raised earlier, if they don't respond within 2 hours, there's a separate provision that means that we, the MTA, are also listed as a beneficiary of the elevator maintenance agreement. So if 2 hours go by and we see no signs of anything happening, the MTA will call the developer's elevator contractor and tell them you need to go fix this elevator. And then of course, lastly, these elevators also need to have the equipment to be remotely monitored by the MTA to make sure they are meeting all of these standards that we've laid out in this agreement.
Very precise, Howie. Thank you. Now,
I'll do my best.
Yeah. Now it's the precision part that was bothering me about the next part. There's a lot of statistics in here, a lot of ratios, 20% for this, 25% for that, et cetera, except we're not seeing the equations. We're just seeing these ratios that are floating disembodied in space for what DCP can decide that some developer gets back for something that they do. Are there hard and fast rules about what DCP will be able to decide based on this? Because my concern is that I'm a big fan of the whole idea of value capture and have been. This seems to me to be an extremely opaque process where we have no real idea what the basis for DCP making decisions about what percentage of variance they're going to grant based on what particular project. And I'd like to know if there is something more substantive behind those ratios that you were putting out there.
Yeah, so that's a good question, Jane. So a lot of the reason that this is there's no hard number values in terms of what each thing means is because at each individual site there are unique conditions. So a lot of what the proportion is up to 20% of FAR granted in exchange for improvements, but certain improvements would cost differently depending on what station they're at, and they're harder to quantify in numbers in that sense. So it is a more negotiation that involves the MTA, the City Planning Commission, as well as the developer. And there's also a discretionary review. So this will be referred out to all the community boards to weigh in as well. And so it's more site by site, depending on station needs in terms of the improvements provided.
Okay, just a couple of responses real quick. One is that you guys are DCP, so you are used to juggling unusual and different aspects of things and creating envelopes for them. And I'm not quite sure I understand why you can't do something similar for that for a variety of situations that might arise in this case. But I'll accept that for now. And I'll just leave it there. Other people have their hands up. I've taken enough time. Thank you.
And just before we go on, Marcus, it's great to see you. It's been a long time since you've been here at CB6, and normally we see you in transportation. So I'm sure we're looking forward to seeing you there again. But Larry, please go ahead.
Yes.
Oh, here we go.
And this is something that Lou and Kathy may also be interested in and may supplement my my comments and questions on. There are two zoning provisions that are unique to Community District 6 that have not been discussed in this presentation, and they may in fact have a major impact on how this proposal works here. First, there's the Second Avenue subway, and the second is the East Midtown rezoning. And my own opinion about East Midtown rezoning that I've expressed in the past was that it should have waited until the Second Avenue subway was built through Midtown to alleviate the pressures that increased density will bring. So the first question that comes to mind is how will this zoning provision work with East Midtown rezoning? I thought I read in the text that if you get a zoning bonus from East Midtown rezoning, you don't also get a double dip here. And then with respect to the Second Avenue subway, I'm assuming that the MTA will be paying for that, or at least have the funding for that, and not depend upon this mechanism to build it.
Yeah, so to your first question about East Midtown, within the East Midtown subdistrict, DFA would just be updating the transit bonus special permit for qualifying sites. So there's two aspects in East Midtown. There's a qualifying site and then there's a non-qualifying site. So for qualifying sites, it would remain as a special permit, but with updates to application requirements and findings. And then for non-qualifying sites, we are replacing the transit bonus that is currently in the East Midtown, which requires a special permit to an authorization to be consistent across the city. So in both scenarios, the transit bonus and FAR structure would remain the same in their respective FAR tables that is in the zoning resolution today. So this is not like an additional on top of that. So that's for East Midtown. And then to your question about the Second Ave subway easement, that is a special transit land use district. So that is separate from this easement requirement. So that this doesn't replace that. The Second Avenue to easement requirement would still be how it is in place today. And I'm going to let MTA speak to funding and the aspect of it.
Yeah, Larry, just briefly about the Second Avenue subway. So we're not reliant on the easement or the bonus provision in zoning for accessibility for really any part of the Second Avenue subway. We have over the last number of decades been obtaining easements where they've, including in CB6, where they will be useful and better integrate those future stations into the landscape and the streetscape in CB6. But it's something where we're dependent on that. That's nothing that will hold up future construction of phase 3 of the Second Avenue subway through CB6.
Okay, can you bring up?
Wells has a question.
I was going
Larry?
to say, can you bring up the map that shows where your stations are and where they overlay? And maybe you could go into some more detail and give examples of how things would be in or would be out from this East Midtown rezoning ASCA.
Yeah, so this shows the map shows the zoning. So up here is you can see in the light orange where the East Midtown subdistrict is over here. And within that, there we have these 3 stations that are within CD6 that are also within the East Midtown subdistrict. So in this area over here, if there is a qualifying site within the East Midtown subdistrict, that would be subject to the requirements that are currently in the East Midtown subdistrict zoning resolution. So that doesn't change. There's just certain updates to that special permit requirements regarding the application and findings, but it doesn't change the FAR table or anything like that. Similarly, for any non-qualifying sites in this area, there is no change to the FAR tables or anything that's currently in the East Midtown zoning. The only change is that for non-qualifying sites, instead of a special permit, it will just it would be an authorization requirement. So it would be similar to all the other expanded bonus program that DFA is proposing, and it would be just consistent across.
Can you just confirm the bottom line? The bottom line, as I originally tried to state it, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, is that there won't be any additional bonus provided in the areas that you get a zoning bonus through East Midtown rezoning. But if, like, you're on the east side of 3rd Avenue, which is not there, then there could be some increased height based upon the distance.
Yeah, so there's no double dipping in that sense, as you put it. It's just one or the other. So it would just be the East Midtown affair tables.
Thank you.
Okay, Wells, please.
Sorry, can you hear me, Sandy? Oh, okay. Could you clarify, you said this really quickly and maybe I missed it, how the bonus applicability works with off-site improvements. That there was something that you mentioned about the ability to, if you have an adjacent site or a site that where you would make an improvement like this, that you is there a way to then use the bonus on a separate site that is not that site?
Yes, so just to clarify, so the applicability is, so again, for areas that are, it's within 500 feet. So any site within 500 feet of a transit bonus station can apply to this program, but it's not that they can use the FAR off-site. So if a site is applicable, they will be using the FAR within their site, but the improvement they're providing will be off-site. So for example, in a station here, if the site is getting a bonus on a corner here, they would be providing the improvement within the 3rd Ave station. So it would be off-site for the site providing the improvement, but not off-site, but the FAR wouldn't be off-site.
Okay, that clarifies it. Thank you.
No problem.
Do we have any other questions from committee members? We have a few questions from the public. Support of ADA access, but the question is regarding if there are auto gate or open to anyone that needs an elevator for bicycles, luggage, etc.
Sure. So right now, AutoGate, which is a program, for those who don't know, where there are automatic doors at subway entrances, that if you have a reduced fare Metro card and you swipe it, it will automatically open the door if you have a reduced fare Metro card because you have some form of mobility disability. And so that exists currently, but it is, as mentioned, only for certain reduced fare cards. It's not, not anyone with any Metro card can use those gates. But that is not really a part of this proposal, but I hope that does answer that question.
Okay, and then Elizabeth Axel asked if she could have to state her position herself. Jesus, if you could give her 2 minutes of comment, please.
Axel, you have the floor for 2 minutes.
Thank you. As a longtime advocate for a fully accessible subway system, the lack of an accessible subway system impacts me and other disabled people's ability to lead the lives we'd like to live in New York City. My parents live within Community Board 6. An elevator is an important accommodation for me when vertigo and other issues make it very difficult for me and on occasion impossible for me to navigate stairs. I need the access elevators will provide. We need to build hundreds of new elevators to make the system accessible to all riders. I understand that the scale of this challenge is enormous. Within Community Board 6 stations, which are not accessible, include 28th Street on the northbound side, 33rd Street on the 6th, 59th Street on the 456, 3rd Avenue on the L. This plan will hopefully help the MTA reach 100% accessibility in the subway system faster and in a more effective way, more cost-effective way. There are very real obstacles that determine the placement of elevators, and ongoing maintenance and upkeep are necessary for each elevator that is installed, requiring developers to provide easements when they build next to a subway station is common sense and will save taxpayer money by reducing the need for relocating utilities that drive up the cost of ADA renovations. Creating an incentive for additional elevators to be built and maintained will help us to reach the goal of full accessibility even sooner. The MTA and city planning have put in a lot of time to meet with advocates and address our concerns, which I greatly appreciate. I hope that the community board and the city council will support this proposal and get us closer to our goal of having a subway that everyone can use. Thank you so much.
Do we have any other comments from the committee? I think I might just summarize some of the concerns that have been discussed within the resolution that was distributed. The ability that this has for developers to join sites, to put them together to get larger areas so that they can achieve this bonus. And I think that's a real concern for some parts of the city. Is that something that the MTA and city planning has addressed?
We can address it. I don't think we have so far. So generally, there's nothing in this proposal that changes existing rules about kind of merging zoning lots. But with this bonus, it's an up to 20% bonus for transit improvements here. And regardless of the site size, there is a calculation that the DCP is going to do and MTA are going to do in terms of cost and making sure that a 20% bonus is commensurate with whatever, or an up to 20% bonus is commensurate with whatever the transit improvements are. So that does, of course, take into account the size of the site, because it's, depending on the size of the site, if the site footprint is twice as big, then a 20% bonus, for example, is twice as many square feet, theoretically twice as much value. And so we'd expect, twice as many elevators, as many, new station entrances, things like that. So in terms of, the concern about zoning lot mergers, it doesn't necessarily change the way this bonus works. And this program doesn't change any way that could happen or not happen. And just generally the program is kind of neutral about on new development. We're trying to kind of harness development as it's already happening, as we've seen kind of a lot of these missed opportunities around our subway stations in particular, across the entire city, because we don't have this easement requirement in place. So I hope that helps answer that question, Sandy.
Some additional questions coming in from the public. Is there an outside limit as when the improvements would be made after the bonuses were given out?
So there is, in terms of, rather than limit, the developer would not be allowed to occupy the space, the bonus that they have generated, without the improvement being completed. So they wouldn't be granted that space, use of that space without the improvement being completed.
And just to clarify, it's not necessarily, the monies aren't necessarily going towards ADA access. It can be used for anything within the subway system, within that station, in that subway system.
So just to clarify two things. So one, no money is changing hands here. There's no kind of cash or anything being given to a developer. It's all in the form of different kind of zoning bonuses or easement and zoning relief and things like that. But in general, ADA access is what we're most focused on. It's what we most need in our transit system. But if a station is already accessible and there's no need, we will be looking at, even if it's already accessible, we'll be looking at redundant accessibility through the bonus. And if that's already met, or there's no need for it, or for some reason it's not possible, then we would also look at circulation improvements and overall station improvements. Because accessibility is a huge problem, but we also have circulation needs, as the previous presentation talked about on, for example, the 7 platform at 42nd Street at Grand Central. And those exist kind of at all of our stations, at many of our stations, not all of our stations, but many of our stations throughout the system. And so we'd look at things like new passageways, new entrances. I think we expect in some circumstances kind of the improvement to be a new staircase that wraps around an ADA elevator and things like that, that were shown in the the example easement slide, but there's a kind of array of benefits here, but accessibility, must be the first improvement if it's not already present. And we'd also be looking at it for redundancy, as well as, passageways, other improvements at the station.
Okay, Larry, and then it looks like we can maybe move ahead with our resolution. Go ahead.
I want to point out that one of the attendees, Kathleen Collins, has been trying to ask questions that are relevant to her situation. And since she does have a handicap, I was wondering if you might allow her to speak.
It looks like she's put her questions in the Q&A. And yes, we do have a request from Ms. Collins to speak. We also have a request from Mr. Vakiel to speak for the 2-minute.
Oh, okay. If Ms. Collins would like to go first, please.
All right, Ms. Collins, mute yourself, please. You have 2 minutes to make your statement.
Good evening. My name is Kathleen Collins, and I am here as a person in the neighborhood. I've been living in this community for more than 20 years. I'm an attorney. I worked for the Port Authority for 30 years, and I am a congenital quadruple amputee. And I do pay taxes. I have a co-op in the neighborhood, and I have listened to the MTA make this presentation a few times, but there are many unanswered questions, such as how long will it be until the MTA builds an accessible entrance and elevator in these areas where they get the easement? What is the outer limit? Second is, who will actually police these areas? Will it be the MTA, or will it be the owner, or a combination of both? Third, will these entrances and elevators be available to the public during all the same times that the station that they allegedly provide access to will also be open? Another question is, how will people be able to find these, quote, accessible entrances and elevators? How far will they be from the main entrance that the rest of the public uses? And what signage will be provided to get a person from when they go over to the main station and they have to find their way to the accessible station? Also, if a person gets stuck in one of these elevators, who will be responsible for letting the police know that they need to rescue the person in these elevators? These and many other questions still seem to be unanswered. And also, we'd like to know, will there be total transparency that the public will be able to review these contracts to make sure that they are being followed and that the MTA is enforcing them against the owners and operators? Thank you.
All right, so I counted. So would the board like me to respond, just to clarify? Sandy, you're muted, sorry.
I'm sorry. Yes, if we could, if we can do it briefly, I think we're all losing a little steam on this issue. So
understood.
Thank
So
you.
to do it quickly, how long until an easement improvement is built after an easement set aside? So there's not a hard and fast rule on that. It will depend on, we're expecting to get easements across the city kind of simultaneously. We cannot build them all at once, and we're going to be looking for funding for those improvements from our existing capital plan and future capital plans. And so, for example, as Marcus mentioned, we're looking to have no rider more than 2 stations away as part of our current capital plan, and we'll of course get more ambitious as we go forward. But so if an easement helped us meet, for example, that goal and our broader accessibility goal, we'd probably prioritize that easement improvement over one that's in an area where there's many accessible station options already, if that makes sense. So there's no hard and fast rule on that, but that's generally the thought. Police, I believe that police, again, if once an easement improvement is built out, it's responsibility of NYPD and MTA as it is right now in all other parts of the system. 3, are entrances through the easement going to be open to the public whenever the subway is available? Yes. As part of that's another agreement that we have with developers that's improved over time. And essentially, any closure of those spaces that we have under these agreements needs to be agreed upon by the MTA. And basically, those closures are really only allowed in cases of maintenance that's needed, because these easements do sometimes need maintenance for a variety of reasons. And if there's anything related to public safety, but generally that is not commonly something that happens. For finding entrances and wayfinding. So generally the easement we hope will help one of our goals is will help us build these entrances much more, and these elevators specifically much closer to platforms, to mezzanine areas, because of the complexities of utilities, everything that Marcus talked about earlier. We often have to build these elevators where they're far away from the mezzanine area, they're far away from a platform, and it is a less than ideal situation. And so one of the goals of these easements in particular is that they will allow us to have these accessible entrances be straightforward, direct routes, because our customers who need elevators are those that really could use that most. And then 5, if you're stuck in an elevator, if it's an elevator, all elevators, I believe in the city, state of New York, need to have, a call button to call police, fire if anyone is stuck in an elevator. Who's responsible for, dealing with that is generally the fire department. But if it's an MTA maintained elevator, MTA would also be involved. If it's a privately maintained elevator, in those limited instances we mentioned that would happen under this proposal, it would be the developer's contractor for that elevator maintenance as well. And lastly, I think public review of contracts, I would have to get back to you. I don't know in terms of what is allowed to be shared and things like that. But generally, the provisions I outlined are in all of our elevator contracts. It's not even specific to this proposal. If it's, elevators we've gotten in the past, that's just kind of our standard contract that we make all of our developers maintaining our elevators enter into. So ensure we don't have elevators that are kind of not well maintained and unfortunately problematic in our system.
Great, thank you. And I think we'd like to move forward. We did circulate a resolution that was sent to everyone today. And again, we have the similar sets of choices that we can have for this. And
Sandy, we
Jesus,
do
I don't know
have,
if-
Sandy, we do have one final speaker from the public. Mr. Sean Bakel has requested to make a 2-minute statement.
Okay.
Mr. Bakel, please unmute yourself, and you have 2 minutes to make your statement.
Hi, good afternoon. Good evening, guys. I know this has been a long session. Unfortunately, too many of these land use things have been put together into this meeting. I'm really concerned about what's being proposed here. I think it's completely inappropriate for us to be rubber stamping a MTA proposal to allow them easements. This is a state-run agency where this board has very minimal representation or influence, and for us to be giving the MTA giving away our rights as citizens and to pass them on to a state agency where we have minimal representation is completely inappropriate. Today, tomorrow, and for future generations. I've been a resident for 22 years, and I think we all can agree as New Yorkers, our voices are so muted, and we can't just be giving 20% variances for developers. Just look at the conversation we had in my comments from the last topic we had. This is completely inappropriate. I completely understand and respect this board's desire to have more ADA accessible, but this is not the way. And the MTA has never proven to be, they've actually proven to be the least fiduciarily responsible agency in this country. And the fact that we're even considering allowing them to rubber stamp and sidestep this council is completely unacceptable to me. Every project they want to do, they can apply for just like every other developer and every other resident. There should be no way that we codify into law that they can sidestep the laws of this city in order to, there's just too much room for abuse here and developer kickbacks, everything. Additionally, We don't need any more office space in New York, or it's insane for us to be considering giving this away without getting anything in return. And the return is, yes, we get ADA accessible, but at what cost? We are funding every single thing out of this. It's not that it's coming out of the developer's project pocket. It's we are funding an open-ended construction budget for the MTA. As let's take, for example, in our district, the 23rd Street elevator, the cost and time frame of these things were enormous without any sort of checks and balances. I'm ranting a little bit and going in circles, but I feel very strongly about this, and this needs far more review before we approve. Thank you. And good night.
And we would like to move forward. If we could, Jesus, if you wouldn't mind again putting up the options that we have. And I know everyone's had a chance to look at the resolution. So no objection, favorable, conditional, favorable, unfavorable, conditional, unfavorable, or waive comment. And for those who have read the resolution, I think we have a lot of concerns. I think we voiced them fairly clearly. Do we have a proposal for which of those we would like to utilize?
Move a resolution of no objection.
Wells has her hand up.
Hi, Sandy. Given that what it's been proposed is really broken into two parts, the first being the easement and the second being the expanded bonus, it complicates it a little bit. I think for me, I'm strongly opposed to the expanded bonus portion of this proposal. So it could be a conditional unfavorable for me. That's what I would be recommending.
And Larry?
I'm leaning toward what Wells is saying, although I was thinking conditional favorable. But before I let this go to any kind of a vote, I need to make a correction in the 8th whereas. I sent...
sorry, Larry. Let's do that later. We need to decide, are we going to be, which direction we're going to take. And as a matter of fact, we might be able to even split this into two issues. I think if we probably don't have any problems with the easement portion of this, and that we could be favorable for that. But I think it's the second portion that Wells mentioned that we do have most of the concern with.
Agreed.
Would that be something that we could move forward with?
I'd have no problem with that.
Wells, you have your hand up?
Sorry, I should have lowered my hand, Sandy.
If you were to agree with that, we could maybe make that a motion.
Yes. So I agree with Larry.
Okay. Is that something we can then move forward with? We separate this, that we have no objections to the easement portion of this, but we're conditional unfavorable based on the second aspect of it, which is providing bonuses within that could lead to merging lots. And sorry, I'm beginning to fade here, but
Sandy, before we move that, actually, DCP, are you guys okay with us submitting two? Are you guys talking about two different resos or one reso but two different?
I think it could be one reso with two different aspects to it, or we could separate them if that makes it easier for DCP and MTA.
DCP, given that we have to submit this through your portal and we're only allowed essentially one say, how would you suggest we structure this?
I'm actually not sure in terms of submitting, like how that would work. So I can get back to you about that after I get some information.
So in terms of planning, currently we can look at it potentially as one, and we can then divide it based on whatever you get back to us with. I think we could move forward with that.
Okay. All right, so it's one reso. Which will it be? Which of these choices will it be?
I guess we'll do conditional unfavorable, but with the proviso that we're perfectly in accord with the easement portion of this.
Okay, and someone should move that.
So moved.
Is there
Do
a
we need
second?
a second?
Okay,
Okay. And then Larry is going to modify the 8th whereas, and we will take a look at that when we go to full board. So let's vote on this now.
one second. Putting a little bit of a reminder for myself.
Great.
All right, I will call your name. You will vote in favor of a conditional unfavorable resolution, opposed to a conditional unfavorable resolution, or abstain to a conditional unfavorable resolution. Jim Collins does not appear to be here. Adam Harkey.
Abstain.
Thank you. Molly Hollister.
Abstain.
Thank you. Kavitha Matthew.
In favor.
Thank you. Sandy McKee.
In favor.
Thank you. Wells Magali.
In favor.
Thank you. Gene Santoro.
Abstain.
Thank you. Larry Shire.
Larry, you're on mute.
I was on another screen. In favor.
In favor. Okay, thank you. And Seligman is here. Lou Sapersky. Lou, if you could unmute yourself, please.
I'm opposed to this resolution.
Okay, opposed. Thank you. Sandro Sherrod. Sandro? Okay. Hearing nothing. Letty Simon.
In favor.
Thank you. And Kathy Thompson.
Favor.
Okay. With 6 in favor, 1 opposed, 3 abstentions, this motion does carry.
Great. The public hearing for citywide text amendment N210270 ZRY that will allow the MTA to work with private developers to make more subway stations ADA accessible is now closed. And I turn the meeting over to Adam.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Sandy. And thank you all to the project teams. And thank you all for taking part in this very mammoth process. All right, 2 ULURPs down, 4 to go, but that's for another night. We have one more item on the formal agenda, and then we're going to turn it over to Parks. And so I believe we have 4 members from Parks. We have Zoe, Sarah, Vanessa, and Stephanie. They're going to give us updates on the Con Ed Pier. Please, the floor is yours, and thank you for sticking with us through this meeting.
Thank you all so much for having us. We promise we'll keep it short and hopefully fun. So I'm just going to share my screen. All right, can you all see that? Okay, great. So we've been to the committee a few times. This is one of our ESCR mitigation projects, and I know that we've made some touch points a few months past and before the pandemic as well. So just wanted to provide a quick update because we are looking to move on this soon, which is very exciting. Let's see if my computer wants to agree with me. There we go. So as mentioned previously, the inspiration for kind of what we're doing out on Waterside Pier is from our Cool Pools initiative. And so Cool Pools has been this really great program where we've been able to kind of go in and make it very cheery and fun and give new life to different spaces throughout the city. And so what we're working with here, as you all probably are very familiar with, is the pier where there's one point of entrance and exit by 38th Street, and it's a fairly long, narrow footprint. You all probably know the site very well, but just to kind of provide some color for those who may not, the space is pretty open, sort of a blank slate right now, which is great and fun for us. There's great views, ferries pass often. The constraints that we're up against are that there aren't any utilities out on the site, and then the footprint is pretty narrow. As we were looking at various options before the pandemic, we were really limited in what we could do because of the narrow footprint. We were looking for sort of different activities where we could activate the space. And I think we came up with a suite of things that folks were fairly excited about beforehand, and we're carrying those things through today. So this is some of the inspiration for the pier. For those who have seen a similar presentation before, similar interventions here. We're looking to paint the surface and do something fun, cheerful, to add some kind of, we're calling them sort of area rugs of synthetic turf to kind of make it a little bit more lively and somewhere fun to hang out. Some fence treatments to give a little bit of a pop of color while also somewhat blocking the FDR, but not making it a very closed off space where you feel unsafe. Adding some metal umbrellas that are fairly low maintenance and provide some shade as well, and as well as a pop of color and kind of vertical element too. Including picnic tables and paint so that, you know, we get that fun element as well. And we're also trying to work with a company to see if they'll be able to provide adult fitness. We're not sure how that will move forward, but right now we're in conversations with some folks. So hopefully we can get something out on site, and we'll keep you all posted as that progresses. But for now, we're going to move forward with what parks can do, which is hopefully something that you all are on board with as well. So this is the creative direction that we're going in. Previously, we had a little bit of a different theme, but we kind of repivoted during the pandemic and thought, you know, we need to bring some cheer and some fun. And so our creative team really came up with this fun concept of a kind of new wave theme. So taking it back to the 80s a little bit, which is really fun. Thinking of, you know, geometric shapes. It's also a lot simpler for our teams to go in and paint. And so it'll be a really effective and cheerful treatment, we think. So similar to things that folks have seen last time around, similar treatments with the metal umbrellas and the picnic tables, painted surface, and synthetic turf. Here's a very quick rendering of what some of that could look like. Of course, this is just a very small snapshot of just a few spaces of treatment, but this would also include the fence banner as well to kind of show a little bit of what that would look like and some of the painted treatment on the surface. We're also thinking about including some really fun signage along the railing in different colors saying "Wish you were here." We're going to have that translated into a few different languages as well. And then our entrance sign would dub this kind of activation new wave pier. I don't know if you all can read this because it's a little small, but welcome to New Wave Pier, brought to you by New York City Parks. We invite you to relax, work out, watch the boats go by, and wave to your friends across the river in Queens. 80s tunes optional, but highly recommended. And so we just wanted to let you all know that we are really excited that we are going to be moving forward with this installation this summer, summer 2021. So for installation, the pier will need to be closed for about 4 to 6 weeks. We're hoping to start kind of after 4th of July and move this forward. So with that, thank you, and I will open the floor to questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Zoe. So I'll go ahead and kick it off. Thank you for this presentation. Really do appreciate it. I have to sort of say my enthusiasm for including the shade. I think it'll be a massive improvement, especially in the summer months, where the pier itself is very active, but, on a hot August day, it leaves a lot to be desired. So I think this will do a lot to sort of improve the year-round use of the pier, which there are many people on this Zoom right now, the eyes and ears on the pier that really can attest that how much usage has increased over the last year plus. It's a valuable amenity and it'll go a long way for this community. So thank you for this presentation, and we look forward to the good work that you're going to be doing here in a few months. I guess the question is that when will you start installing sign? With that said, there's a lot of people who do use it, all around. And we understand it needs to be closed. When will you start posting signage to alert users that they'll have to find sort of alternative recreation?
That's a great question. We can take that back to our folks and make sure that we have signage up kind of in advance and let folks know. We'll take that back to our team and make sure that they kind of get that in the works.
Greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, I see Gene has his hand raised. Gene, floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. I just had a question about the bike lane that I'm not seeing on this. This is supposed to hook up as part of the New York Greenway. Eventually, we're currently, Carolyn Maloney just put it in the federal infrastructure budget to finish the gap in front of the UN. So we're hopeful that we can get some money. So when that happens, this is going to be connected to the rest of the Greenway and people are going to be cycling through here. So where would they be doing that?
I think we can kind of leave that open. I think right now we don't have Greenway lanes painted here, but it's definitely something that we can incorporate in future. This is really meant to be an activation as part of the ESCR mitigation suite. So this is kind of a more interim measure where we're really liveling it up. But I think, we're very much open to including bicycle infrastructure in future as well.
Okay, understood. But in fact, if you spend any time there, you'll see that a lot of people are riding their bikes there already, even though they can't jump to the next segment of the Greenway. So I'd suggest that you might want to think about that just a little bit before you finalize this particular layout. Thanks.
Understood. Thanks so much. And just to clarify as well, we're going to make sure that there's enough space around these various amenities so that peds and bikes can circulate around the pier.
Thank you.
Great. Sandy, floor is yours.
Is there any way that you could phase this so that it could be open during the full summer? I mean, unfortunately, that's when it gets the biggest use. And would it be possible to kind of start at one end and leave half of it open, or some way to at least have it open this summer?
So I know that there are a few folks on this call as well who are on our implementation side, but I believe the best way to kind of move this forward in the quickest fashion would be to close off the pier for a certain amount of time and just kind of get everything done as quickly as possible. I think if we did do it piecemeal, it would be a bit difficult and we'd have to have crews come back from different projects. So I think at this stage that may not be feasible, but understood and noted, and we're going to try to turn it around as quickly as possible.
Great, thank you. We have some questions in the chat, but before we do, I have to ask a selfish question. So with the turf, would it be possible for me to possibly play bocce ball?
Great question.
I don't know if it's great. I'm just curious.
I don't know if it's a regulation bocce size, but I think you can improvise. That's my official hunch there.
Okay, so Parks approved. Great, thank you. So thank you. So we're going to go into two questions. Gary has a question. This is a really important one. Will the underpass at 37th Street be cleaned up and have better lighting? Will this be a part of this project?
That's a good question. That is outside of Parks's purview, I believe, but I can circle back and see if there are others that are working on that connection as well.
Yeah, and this is Sarah. This is Sarah, also from Parks. I'm aware that there have been some conversations about some work in that underpass, maybe DOT and some other folks from CB6. I don't have all the details because it's not quite our world, but so there might be some other things going on in that world. Have you heard of those?
I've heard some stuff, but I
Okay,
haven't heard
okay.
anything official.
Yeah. So it's not directly connected to this project, but I think it is happening, and we hope they're timed together. It'd be great.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, for those
Okay.
viewing at home, this is a jurisdictional nightmare of 4 or 5, 10 different agencies. So any sort of progress is welcome, and for better or for worse, incremental. So thank you for being able to make some, with this.
Great.
Okay, excellent. So with that, don't see any more questions. So thank you, team. We hope to hear from you soon from sort of the outstanding questions that we had. And maybe in September, I have a bocce set, and if it might not have to be regulation size, but maybe see you all out there.
We'll have our next meeting on the pier.
Honestly, I'm very much in favor of that. If the rules allow, we'll bring it up at exec. Sandy is also in favor, so that's half the battle.
Half the battle right there.
Yeah.
It looks like Larry would like the floor.
Oh, I'm sorry, Larry. Larry, floor is yours. Oh, you're on mute, Larry.
Again, if you would take a quick look at the chat for some additional questions, kind of good.
Yeah, I mean, no, we're not supposed to use the chat. So it's if you post it in the Q&A, I'll ask the question. But I'm sorry.
I'll repeat the most
important. Well, go for it.
With metal umbrellas, don't they attract lightning?
Hi, this is Parks Deputy Commissioner Mark Folk, Parks Chief Operating Officer. Metal umbrellas themselves, considering the high-rise environment we're in, are not likely to attract lightning, and they also will be grounded to the concrete deck.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So thank you very much. Greatly appreciate you providing us updates. And again, we're looking forward to hearing more from your team. Thank you all for hanging in there. And
thanks so much. All right. Thank you. Have a good night, you guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Okay. All right. So we're in the 18th inning of this meeting. So we're going to go into the chair's report. I'm going to be, I would love to be brief or to waive it, but unfortunately I can't. So the big pressing item for the chair's report is sort of the outstanding ULURPs that we do have. And so kudos to Jesus, who has been doing his best to sort of hone us in and to get a set schedule in this sort of moving target. And so we've received updates from the other applicants, and the long and short is there's still we still need to nail down a few more. And so in short, the way that we have it on the calendar at this very moment is that we are looking at the hotel zoning text amendment underneath Kavitha's committee, strategic planning. And then we had also put out a feeler for a second sort of supplemental land use meeting that would potentially look at the Commodore and the health and wellness text amendment. However, there are some conflicts. With the second is the same night that the Commodore is being presented to CB5. And so unfortunately, they can't be at two places at once. And so essentially what this means is that we have to either have two meetings, or we could potentially sort of bundle everything together into a joint meeting, a joint land use and a joint strategic planning committee meeting. I'm open to either. I don't think we're going to solve it this evening. I think we still need to get some clarification from the applicants themselves. But if anybody'd like to sort of discuss this point, pro or con or what they prefer, I'm open. Larry.
We've got some precedent in the past of having joint meetings with CB5. And if we could, because we're on Zoom, somehow have a joint presentation, that might solve that problem.
Yeah, it's still sort of, Jesus, you want to take this?
Yes, I'm sorry. We've
Yeah, please.
explored that option with CB5. They are not enthusiastic for that option because already their committee will be joint land use and transportation. There will be a huge committee, and they worry that everyone will get lost in the mix if we add another dozen people to it potentially. So that is not the ideal option for CB5.
Yeah. So again, I think we need to go back, or Jesus is going to coordinate with the other with the applicants to see sort of what the options are there. But we'll see. Kavitha, please.
Yeah, I just, Adam and I spoke earlier and I suggested we should think about just doing one meeting if possible. But I'm fine with either, however it works out, because I feel like the majority of our meeting is going to be these items anyway. And I think another thing we were going to talk about was budget.
Right.
Budget items, and we can probably fold that in as kind of a joint discussion as well. I know it would be a long meeting, but I think it might be more efficient just to get through them in one. If the June 2nd meeting at this point is really mainly the health and wellness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's essentially we're going to have to do the work one way or another. The overlap on the committees, I think, is 90%. So it's whether or not it's one night or two. So I guess stay tuned. We'll probably have a firm answer probably by tomorrow, if not tomorrow during executive committee on Wednesday. Okay. Well, as chair of this committee, I have to thank you all for your patience and all the hard work that you've done so far. Thank you to Sandy and Kavitha for assisting in this sort of mammoth load. I think 6 ULURPs is, if it's not unprecedented, it's definitely ties some sort of record. And I'd also like to thank Sandy and Larry for their hard work that they've done on the resolutions that you guys voted on earlier today. Really sort of put us ahead in terms of the workload, which is very important. So with that said, so on the horizon, what we're looking at is the hotel zoning text amendment, the health and wellness text amendment, and the Commodore project. Yeah, so that's 5. Yeah. So we have those coming up. So if you're interested in either of those, please reach out to either 3 of us, and there's definitely work to be done. And so one last chair's item, I guess. Kavitha, did you have something else, or no? Okay. One last chair's item. I had a chance many weeks ago to attend sort of a re-envisioning session of the FDR sponsored by NYU and the Urban Land Institute and a few other organizations. And the long and short is I sort of reiterated our positions through resolutions that we've made over the years in terms of what we'd like to see for the FDR and in terms of open space on the east side. There was a pretty enlightening conversation that they had in terms of somebody from the borough president's office, in terms of resiliency, somebody speaking of mobility, smart connected highways. It was sort of a whole grab bag of things to a former, I think, city planning commissioner underneath Bloomberg, who now is the dean at Berkeley, I think either the planning school or the architecture school, who was like, maybe take a lane or 2 or 5 or 6. And what's good is that I was able to share the most recent transportation resolution with sort of their team, which was readily accessible via Airtable. So this is good. So these might be sort of a future partnership in the future in terms of their sort of ongoing efforts of potentially how to re-envision the east side. I think that they might be building a report or some sort of deliverable with all the interviews and things that they did. And once that comes available, I'll be sure to share it with everybody. So yeah, so potentially some fun opportunities in the near future. Okay, so we're gonna move on to old and new business. I know Lou had an item that was old but is new again. So the floor is yours, Lou.
Very briefly, a number of years ago, the board passed a resolution calling for the study by the City Planning Commission of providing electrical outlets for the charging of vehicles and to explore the various issues and related. We went through three committees joined in the resolution, and I think it's time, since electric vehicles and electric cars and trucks and buses are now very much a part of the equation, that we revisit the issue and press for more current approach to the mechanics of providing charging stations and electric outlets for vehicles.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. I think it is something that needs to be reconsidered. And I guess this is something we can talk about in exec on Wednesday, and we can decide how it should be advanced amongst the board.
It was a land use and zoning resolution when it was dealt with in the first instance. And I was going to suggest that the resolution that was passed at the time be circulated to the committee, and we begin to frame out various thoughts which we can accumulate into a draft resolution.
Sure. So I guess this is something that we can begin to explore in the June 28th meeting, after we hear our final ULURP for the open streets. And depending on how that goes, we can potentially pass a resolution there, or we can continue to work on it through the summer and bring it to the September full board.
Given past experience, I think we're probably going to have a first draft on the 28th, and then we'll polish it off during the summer and bring it to the September board meeting.
Sounds great. Let's think of something else. Jesus, would this be available via the Airtable?
It doesn't go back that far, but I can try, because that was this is a resolution that's 10 years old that Lou's talking about, but I can try and dig it up from the archives and go ahead and put it up there if the committee is interested in actually moving on this.
It's 10 years and 3 months, and I have the text of the resolution. It was in the May 11th, 2011 board meeting, and I have the text here together with the 3 draft resolutions that preceded the final board action on the subject.
Well, we have those minutes. We provided you with those minutes, so we'll take a look at those. If you have the actual, I will look in our archives to see if we actually have the formatted resolution, because that would be a good thing to put. We are trying to go back as far as we can with putting resos on the Airtable. So might as well start with this, something like this.
I'll work with Jesus on that, since I have the text and the preceding drafts at hand.
Wonderful, I'd appreciate that, thank you. And to echo what's been said in the chat, Lou, I believe you framed it into sort of an all-encompassing thing about multiple vehicles, not just cars. And so, yeah, I think it would be, especially in this era of micro-mobility, to sort of expand it, for all things, bikes, scooters, wheelchairs, etc. So it would be definitely, to quote you, it's very timely to revisit this subject. So thank you for bringing it to our attention. And so I guess sort of one last plug. And so again, mentioned sort of previously in the board's chair and kind of old new business, East Side Greenway stuff. So I believe we're going to explore this more specifically within the budget discussion, be that either coordinated with Kavitha's committee next week in some capacity, or we'll focus more on it on June 28th. But again, it's one of those things, stay tuned. So again, with that, that's pretty much all I have. Is there anything else from the committee before we adjourn? Okay, I'm seeing none. Again, I want to thank you all tonight for this marathon meeting. The San Francisco Giants used to give out like special medals, like if it went in extra innings. So maybe that's something we can do for this committee after we get through all 6 of these, 6 ULURPs for CB6, why not? So do I have a motion to adjourn? All right,
Motion
Sandy.
to adjourn.
All right, So moved.
And,
All right.
and thank you, everyone, for your patience with me tonight. It was tough.
No, thank you. Wonderful work, Sandy.
And yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. See you all soon.